Shalom and welcome to a very special edition of Parsha Talk. I'm Rabbi Elliot Malamet in Highland Park, New Jersey, Highland Park Conservative Temple Congregation on Shemen, and joining me, my good friends, Rabbi Barry Chesler in Long Island, Solomon Schechter, and joining us from Jerusalem, Rabbi Jeremy Kalmanofsky on Sheikh Chesed. But Rabbi Jeremy Kalmanofsky is in Jerusalem. Tell us what you're doing there and how long you've been there.
Yeah, we're recording this on Wednesday evening. I left Motzei Shabbat, and I arrived Sunday afternoon, evening. We're on a trip of about 30. Well, I guess it added up with all the participants who came in and out, about 40 Masorti rabbis, some lay leaders, some executive directors, to make a solidarity trip here to Israel, to be with our brothers and sisters, to stand with our brothers and sisters at a time of enormous grief and shock. It's now Wednesday, so we spent. I got to see some of my own friends. Our friends came from Jason Rogoff, and some other people who grew up in my shul, and other friends that I've had, and I will do that again tomorrow. But the trip ended today, and most of the other participants went back to the United States and to Argentina and Brazil and Mexico and all the other places that they came from. Also, by the way, Steve Warnick was there from Toronto, Canada, north of the border.
So
Go ahead.
So much to process, but what have you seen? What have you done? What have you been?
It is a lot. The country is, first of all, I want to encourage our listeners and viewers. You should come. You should come whenever you can. The people here expressed to us enormous. We came to express solidarity, and they accepted it with great love. And people were, and I would meet people on the streets, and I would, the hotel that I'm staying in here, the Dan Panorama, is filled with what are called mifunim, the displaced or the evacuated. The cities of the Otef Aza region, the envelope around the Gaza Strip, and then even the other cities like Sderot, a little bit further away, Netivot, they're largely emptied out, and the cities of the north are also emptied out, even though the war blessedly hasn't really begun in the north. Plenty of residents, I think even more residents, have been evacuated from a range of Hezbollah's rockets. The hotel that I'm in, of course, there's a lot of trauma, and there's a lot of children. The place is crawling with children, and Jerusalem has, encouraged some school opportunities. There's musical presentations here, and I'm looking at the children, and it seems like the community, their families, and the Jerusalem municipality, is doing a wonderful job of giving some normalcy. And it's like the lobby of the hotel is filled with laughing children, which is a really good thing, because the society, just walking around, people are on the verge of tears. People are shell-shocked. Certainly the first week or two, they were shell-shocked completely. And there's a little bit more normalcy. Restaurants are open, and buses are running, and people are going to work. Although, frankly, many of the businesses are operating at a very skeleton crew, because so many of the men at any rate are in reserve duty. But one thing that absolutely everybody said, virtually without exception, is that this is not post-traumatic stress. We're be'emtza traumatic stress. We're all shocked. We're all grieving. We have not yet made sense of it. We're not trying to make sense of it at this point. That's down the road, making sense of it, and what comes next, that's down the road. But there is incredibly strong resolve for the military operation. There is, I would say most people say that the divisions of the last year, all the political strife, all of the divisions between right and left, or pro government or anti-government, none of it is gone away. It's some combination of papered over and set in the corner. Like, everybody is, Yachad Ninatzeach is the slogan that's everywhere. Together we will win. And I feel an incredibly strong sense of Yachad Ninatzeach everywhere you look, everywhere you go. Everybody is talking about praying for. I bought myself a T-shirt at the rally at a rally spot in the families forum for the hostages. We spoke to the mother. Oh my God, I don't think that I could last 30 seconds if I thought one of my children was captured by Hamas terrorists. She's she fell apart several times. She told us her story. It was one of the most astonishing experiences I've ever had. Anyway, I bought a T-shirt that says, here, I'll show it to you. Machzirim otam habayta achshav. Bring them home now. And I was wearing this T-shirt, and people are stopping on the street saying, "Love your shirt," and the focus on Yachad Nenatzech. We're going to get through this. We're going to win this war, and then we're going to have to build something new, because there's a really strong sense that I won't sing the song because it's got dirty words in it, but Warren Zevon has a song that says, the stuff that used to work won't work now. Like whatever it is that we have put together in the past and we've managed to deal with stuff, didn't work. We're going to have to find something else that's going to work.
So, and just tell us one more thing. Tell us, I mean, you did take a trip down to the area, and I think it's really important, for people who are loyal to our little club here, to hear from you, to hear you're like a witness. I mean, you are literally a witness now. It's
so I was at the kibbutz of Kfar Aza, which suffered, I think they told us 58 deaths. I think about, what did they say, 400 people perhaps? I could be wrong about the numbers. I don't remember, but I think it was 58 deaths from this kibbutz. And we went to the spot where you could see Gaza, like probably, I don't know, I guess maybe 5 kilometers away, and you could see sort of no man's space, and then you could see where the border fence was breached, and then you could see where the kibbutz fence was breached. And the section where the most devastation happened were a series of small houses that, like, young people, while in the army or right after, they kind of lived in small, not like, multi-room houses, but 1 or 2 room houses. And at least of what we saw in Kfar Aza, that was the principal site of the devastation. And I mean, I don't want to be too graphic more than is necessary, but let's just say that you saw the marks on the walls where people were shot and murdered, and when you walk around, you also saw. I mean, they told us so many terrible stories. The bodies were booby trapped so that when people moved them, they exploded and hurt the first responders or killed the first responders as well. There are bullets lying around the ground, destroyed cars. One thing that especially just was so heartbreaking is, the soldiers who cleaned up, or the police who cleaned up, they're like, I saw this after Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans too. Like the rescue people, they would write, how many dead bodies they found or something like that, or they'd mark an all clear on the house. And there was, I think, what did they say? There's a samech pei on houses, siluk ptsatzim, the bombs have been removed. But I also saw on one wall written that one of the, like a police person or whatever, wrote, I'm sorry to say,
we lost them.
because okay, we're back.
We're back. You're sorry to say.
What was the last thing you heard?
You were talking about the samech pei, and then
Samech pei. I think stands for Siluk Ptsatzim, that the bombs have been removed. Obviously, like they discovered bombs and they sapped them or whatever. But I also saw something that a police or a rescuer or a soldier or whatever had written. I saw several of these, but this is one example. Suride Adam al Hasafa, human remains on the sofa. Like it was just unbelievable. And they told us many really horrifying stories. Now's not the time to relate, but I mean, I think that all of our listeners and viewers know this fact that there's terrible things and there's enormous suffering that's going on in this war, and no one should be cavalier about the suffering of civilians in Gaza. And I don't want to make this a that if you support Israel, that you don't care about the civilians in Gaza. That shouldn't be the case. But we should also know and not sugarcoat it and be honest that this was an orgy of violence and cruelty that was not incidental, civilian casualties. The point was civilian casualties. The point was to go to the dance festival and disembowel people. And we and the many cruel stories that they told us. We also went to, and here I'm just going to be as elliptical as possible. We went to the military base where the IDF rabbinate is engaged in identifying the remains of people, which could be quite difficult because people were burned. And yes, it is true, people were beheaded. They were very clear about those things. And their work was, I asked them, do you feel like you're the Chevra Kadisha? They said, not exactly, because there is a Chevra Kadisha that deals with burial, but we feel that same sense of reverence for life, that same sense for reverence for human life in the way we treat these bodies. And one last thing about, and we were talking before we started recording about how can we transition from this back to the parasha. I didn't think about this until I started telling this story. This is really ugly, and this does call to mind. I personally don't like to make Holocaust comparisons to anything but the Holocaust. I like to keep that in one box and not let it spill over to other things. But this part might be interesting to our viewers. As you know, Hamas is like whatever. The PLO may hate Jews or may hate Israel, but it's not a religious war. And for Hamas, it is a religious war. It's Islam against Judaism. And so they assaulted the Torahs and they stole Torahs. And when I was there, we went in this room that has the guy referred to it as the largest Aron Kodesh in the world. I mean, they were probably, I don't know, 250 Sifrei Torah that the army, I don't think it's from here. I mean, they collect Torahs that they then are in a position to, bring to bases and help people use. And while I was there, they were celebrating that they had recovered a Torah that the Eitz Chaim, the wooden handle, had been shot off, and they put a new one on there, and they were taking it out to enable somebody else to use that Sefer Torah, which maybe is not a bad segue. Yeah.
Okay, so the question I have, we're studying Parshat Hayyei Sara, and under normal circumstances, it's such a rich, beautiful parsha, and I'm going to ask the question in terms of, seeking nechama, seeking comfort from the Torah, and how studying the Torah or picking a verse or picking a story or picking an idea can be comforting. It's not to say, what would you say to people, but it's maybe what would you say to us, or what would where would we turn? Speaking to the bereaved in Israel is one thing. I mean, we're not going to give our eulogies there. I mean, there's really not, we're lost for words, but we are focused on this parsha, and there are, not surprisingly, little glimmers of comfort, little hugs of comfort from this parsha. I mean, we have some important stories. It's a transition of generations, but I'm going to turn to you, Barry. Where would you Where would you find comfort here?
So I would begin with one of my favorite verses in the Parsha at the beginning of chapter 24, Baranai Berach et Avraham Bakol, that God blessed Avraham with everything. And it's a cause of much discussion in the rabbinic literature. What makes the verse itself so surprising is that Abraham is blessed with everything. That's recorded after the death of Sarah.
Yeah.
I think for us, the lesson is that loss does not necessarily mean loss of blessing. That even after the death of Sarah, Abraham was able to experience blessing. And I think it can offer us a
Sorry, this is.
We're having a little technical difficulties. Chapter 24. Chapter 24 is the death and burial of Sarah, and Abraham buys what will be the Merat Machpelah, the cave. 2025 is as Barry said, it begins with this claim that Abraham was entirely blessed even at the loss of his wife. And then what does he do with it? Looks to the future. His son Isaac remains unmarried, and he is going to send the servant off back to Mesopotamia to get a wife. Of course, who will be Rebecca? We don't know that yet, but she will be Rivka. And Abraham says, essentially, okay, I've had a terrible loss, and I still have destiny, and I still have a future. Now let's get it on. Let's take the steps necessary to enact the future promise.
So we missed part of the postscript of what you said, Barry. It was bakol that how did you say it? That blessing still comes after loss, right?
That even after a loss, it doesn't necessarily mean the loss of blessing.
Right.
That we can experience blessing again. And it's hard for those of us who have been mourners. We can recall from the time of our mourning that it's very difficult to think about that in the presence of our dead.
Yeah. And it's very hard to, that the grieving person to convey that you're still going to have blessing. I mean, I think because we've passed the milestone of 30 days since the massacre, I think we can begin to use some of that language. And Jeremy, your text basically is the text that is focusing on the hinge moment where Abraham's is seizing destiny. Really, that's what you're saying, right? That you got to look forward. And in the similar vein, I would look to, of course, there's comfort simply in the joy of reading that beautiful story. It's a very romantic story between Abraham, his servant, the servant's journey. I happen to love that character because he's such a great storyteller and he's so wordy. And the story lends itself to such a great analysis in terms of what transpires and how he relates it. And he's such a clever salesman. And everything is hinging on his ability to close the deal. But there's also, and I'm going to piggyback on what you said, Jeremy. There's one moment that everything hinges on, and all Jewish destiny hinges on, and that's they're with Bethuel and Lavan, and he's made his pitch to them, and they're kind of hesitating, and they then turn to her. And they say, "Are you going to go with him?" Vayomro eleha hatelchi im ha'ish hazeh, which is chapter 24, verse 58. They call her after his big pitch, right? Vayomru eleha, they say to her, "Atechini meish hazeh," and what does she say? Elech, I'm going. I'm going.
I like what you just said, because I'm having to be looking on the Safari as on this call here. It's the JPS translation. They called to Rebecca and said, "Will you go with this man?" And she says, in the English translation, she says, "I will." But that's wrong.
It's wrong.
Why would you do that? Elech
Means
I'm going.
I'm going.
That's better.
It's so much better, and it says in the one word, it captures everything. It says, it's not I'm leaving this place behind, although it could be, but it's I need to latch on to my future. My future is not here, and my future is with this man who is the servant of our relative, who is going to introduce me to a man that I haven't seen, I don't know, I don't even know anything about. But I do know, and I'm just going to kind of wax a little bit, in my own way, which is that she must know that there's some kind of hand pushing her, that she must have a sense that of the divine here, and she must have at least some inkling that this man Abraham was taken from his own place, their place, because he was a special human being. And so I'm going to go to where there's a special human being, and I'm going to marry his son, and you can't stop me. And that's really what she's saying. And I know the Midrash says that she's very young here, and all that doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
We've talked about this before. In a sense, Rebecca is the new Avraham.
Yes, exactly.
And I just want to add something to this part of our conversation, that at the beginning, when Avraham sends the servant off, he makes him take an oath. And the oath that he makes him take is that under no circumstances shall Isaac be permitted to marry a Canaanite, a local woman. And the conversation continues, and the servant says, "But what if the woman I find will not come back to the land with me?" And Abraham says, in that case, you are released from your oath, because Isaac cannot leave the land. And so the choice for Abraham is that if you have to choose between family and the land is crucial. And I think that's why the Parsha begins with the acquisition of the cave of Machpelah, which is what cements the destiny of the people in the land. When Rebecca comes, she doesn't just marry Isaac, she marries the family to the land, because that's where the destiny of the people must be.
And,
Right.
and in fact,
can I add one thing here? We've talked in the past, and I think it's quite correct, as Barry said, that that Rebecca is the critical patriarch or matriarch of this generation. Abraham has to make a journey. Yaakov has to make a journey. Isaac makes no journey; he stays in the land. Rebecca makes the journey. She is therefore like Abraham and like Jacob. But as I read this verse, and I was thinking about that, look at the presence of the word lech in this verse twice.
Definitely.
What is the central verb in the Abraham story?
Lech lecha.
Lech lecha, vayelech lech lecha le'eretz haMoriah. She's a this is awkward to say. She's a lecher. She's a holechet, and I think I don't know if some of the classical readers ever made that particular little homily, but it's, as I'm just hearing that verse, vatomer elech, and this is a lech lecha moment, and Rebecca, in recapitulating Abraham, is really a lech character.
So let's take the last few minutes to talk about where the word nechama comes in at the end of this parsha, and we'll talk about what's going on. So it's an extraordinary scene. She's coming in a caravan. He's in the field. Doing what in the field is not quite clear. And I would just draw attention to my class this week where we discussed it. I'm not going to go into it now. You can see it on another YouTube channel, another YouTube video. So she sees him, she asks, who is this guy? And the servant says, that's my master. She covers herself. And then I love the fact that this loquacious raconteur who can't stop talking, it's in one verse. The servant tells Isaac everything that happened. That's it. That's the whole story. Tells him everything that happened in one verse. Okay.
Well, I mean, to be more precise, he says to Isaac everything that he did.
Yeah.
He didn't really do all that much because he mostly talked.
Oh, he's a talker. Okay. And then the clincher. Vayivieha Yitzchak ha'ohela Sara imo. Isaac brought Rebecca into, now is it ha'ohela or it's a ha'ohela, right? He brought her into his mother's tent. He takes Rivka, vayikach et Rivka, vatihi lo liisha. She becomes his wife, vaye'ehaveha, and he loves her. Vayinachem Yitzchak acharei imo, and he is comforted after his mother. And so, in the plainest way of understanding this text, he forms a new relationship. He forms a loving relationship, and that full relationship is a source of comfort for him, a comfort after his mother. Which, we tend to interpret it, he marries his mother. I don't think that that's exactly what's going on there. It's the understanding that the loss of his mother was so tragic for him, where he was desolate after it. He was aimless after it. And
maybe that's why, maybe that really drives home Barry's point that Adonai Berachat Avram Bakol had the loss, and Abraham was in a place of still feeling blessing. Isaac maybe has to learn that, maybe has to take a little longer to get there, or something like that.
Yeah. And the blessing comes out of, it's not, excuse me, not coming out of, wealth or possessions or property. It's coming out of a relationship, out of the most, authentic, part of a human life, which is to be bound to another person. And then the sense that there is something that's going to unfold from here, that we're going to build something together, that in our coming together, we can find comfort. And don't forget also, we tend to forget this from Rebecca's perspective. She's lost a lot too. She's never going to see her family again. She never sees her mother or her father again, or her siblings. There's a bereavement that she experiences, and the text is silent on that. It's focused on Isaac's comfort, but in a sense, and here is where I would just use a little license and say, is it comforting for her also? Is she comforted here? And in a way, are these two grieving people finding comfort in each other? And so, Jeremy, you're in Israel, and you're seeing people who are broken and wounded and traumatized, and without going into the stories of all the terrible losses there, but people are comforting each other, I suppose. That they have to find a way to give each other comfort. What would you say in terms of?
Yeah, I think there's a very good deal of that. So it's both in a practical ways and emotional ways. I mean, our audience may know that the level of volunteering is just unprecedented. The protest movements have become volunteering collection central. We were at a big underground garage that is filled with there's whole sections of clothing and whole sections of toys for kids, and people are cooking for the mifunim, the displaced people out of the south and the north. And in that big underground garage, like the different kinds of stuff, women's shoes and men's clothes and children's toys and all kinds of stuff. There's one whole section that is plastic chairs and tables and silverware and plates designed for shivas.
Wow.
The shivas that maybe have already happened or the ones that are going to come, that if somebody has to have a time of mourning, they're gonna be there with the stuff that they need to be able to have shiva. And
It breaks your heart. Everything is breaking.
I just want to add something. I know we're near the end, but you were talking about the blessing of Isaac, and actually there is a blessing for Isaac in the Parsha. So if you look at chapter 25, verse 11, Vayhi acharei mot Abraham, Vayavorach Elohim et Yitzchak beno, Vayeshev Yitzchakim be'er lachai ro'i. So after the death of Abraham, God blessed Isaac, his son, and Isaac dwelled at be'er lachai ro'i. So I think here we have this sense of blessing after loss again. And the other thing that I think is important for us is that Isaac goes to Be'er Lachai Ro'i, which is associated with Hagar. And that for us, can help us, remind us that we can find people from all parts of life, people that don't ordinarily appear to us as friends or as comforters, can actually provide comfort, because Isaac never moves too far away from Hagar. And it's one of the things that the Torah indicates elliptically, as is often the case, because he keeps circling back to this place, which is so strongly identified with Hagar. So she, I think, was part of the comfort for Isaac. It was not just Rivka.
Interesting.
And perhaps that also could be a source of comfort in the troubled Middle East as well.
Indeed.
lovely.
So here we are. We've come to the end of our conversation, and we are, of course, dedicating our study to the hostages and thinking about everybody who is in need of comfort now. And we hope that the people watching us, our friends and family, and people that really are devoted to our conversations, I hope you get a little bit of comfort. We're so grateful that you spend some time with us. We thank you for being there. Jeremy, have a great trip back, or an easy trip back. It's a quick trip there, and just look, a lot of nechama from us to everybody too. To you, you are our shaliach of nechama. And with that, I'll say everyone Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
See you all next week on the next edition of Parsha Talk. Bye-bye.